so a lot has happened since we last talked. So, and I know you were critical of the DOT director or the governor's decision not to fire him sooner. So the DOT director is leaving, apparently on his own accord. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's 2 years too late, but I think the people of Rhode Island have suffered so much in the last couple of years. I met so many people whose lives have been upended, and the governor has talked a lot about accountability. It's been no accountability. Nothing has changed in the DOT in the last 2 years, and so this is good for Rhode Island, but we need so much more out of our governor in terms of holding himself accountable, his people accountable, and making sure the state's really working for the people of Rhode Island.
So do you still think it's a knock on the governor that Peter Alviti is now leaving on his own and that he was not forced out?
Well, I mean, it's very unclear. There's been a lot of back and forth, but at the end of the day, the governor owns this, right? This is everything lands on the governor in terms of how he responds to a crisis. And to have someone in this position for 2 years who's done nothing to change the world, the DOT, is a big miss on the governor's part, definitely.
And so, right, it's easy to look at it from the outside and say, oh, we should have fired that person, this should have been different, that should have been different. Do you blame Alviti or the governor for what led up to it? You know, the governor says, I was handed a bad bridge or told we were going to fix this. And again, that goes to his predecessor, Gina Raimondo, and Alviti came before him too. Do you think he bears any fault in that, or is it all the response after?
I think we'll learn more about what happened leading up to it, but there is so much responsibility for what's happened in the last 2 years. The way the governor has not responded to the crisis has hurt the people of Rhode Island. I won't get into all the details, but the way he contracted to win someone to build the next bridge took us a year too long. And he was putting politics over the people of Rhode Island, and that did hurt Rhode Islanders, and that's ultimately on the governor, absolutely.
And so what would you have done differently?
Well, the first thing you got to do when you're a governor is you surround yourself with great people and you hold them accountable. Then you reach out to people who know a lot more than you do. I'm always willing to say what I don't know. As I've talked to people who understand this sector, what they say to me is that we could have done such a better job with the bidding process. The governor put politics over people in the sense that he desperately wanted a new bridge built by this election. So he put big penalties in place for anyone who was going to bid on it. And then he waited 6 months, and lo and behold, no one bid. And then he had to start over. So when I tell people on the streets this story about what really happened, and it's all public, it's, people are besides themselves because their lives have been so upended. They've changed daycare. They've changed how they think about getting to work to punch in on time. And so everyone is saying, my life is so upended, and yet nothing has changed. The governor promised us a day of reckoning, and we have no more sense of accountability. And that is ultimately very much on the governor.
Do you expect the bridge to be the central focus of your campaign against him?
Well, look, I think the bridge is a huge annoyance for people, and it is a very good example of the lack of competence. And ultimately, I think that's what the people of Rhode Island are looking for. I'm not running just on the Washington Bridge. I'm running because I love this state. I want people who are here to be able to afford to live here, to get a great paying job, to make state government really work for them, because we have an amazing state we live in. And the bridge is a microcosm of how it doesn't work right now, but I really believe it can. But there's so many other issues that really matter to people, making sure, as I said, that people can have a great paying job, that they can have a house that they afford, and that they live a great life here. And those are the things that when I'm meeting with people, yes, they complain about the bridge, but they're looking forward to say, what could you help me do as you think about the next 8 to 10 years in Rhode Island and building this as a place where I'm so proud to live, but I want to make sure my children and grandchildren can live here too.
And so what do you tell people, or what is your plan to do that, or what do you think you can do that the governor is not doing to make life better, more affordable? Because he is now talking about his affordability for all agenda. Like, what do you think you can do that he's not doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's here he is, he's asking for an unprecedented extension of being governor. He would be one of the longest serving governors in our state, and yet he seems only to jump into action when it's an election year. And I think people see this. They see the state not working. I think the most important thing, as I said, is you get great people around you and you make sure that they're doing the work. That's what I learned to do in my life. I had 200,000 people working for me at CBS, and I had people around me who were smarter and better than me. And I was working really hard every day, rolling up my sleeves, pushing them. So what I want to do for the people of Rhode Island is make sure, for example, we have a pathway to building much more housing to make it affordable for the people in the state. And we have plans to reduce the cost of electricity and build a climate-friendly state. And those are all things that the governor talks about, but there's no action. And so I think that the power of a governor is that you can take all the legislative work that's happened, but you have to operationalize it. You have to put a plan in place. You have to have milestones. You have to hold people accountable. I do know how to do that, and I want to do it for the people of Rhode Island because I know I could make life better for them.
So he came out with this whole energy plan, which seems to be kind of pushing off or delaying the green energy incentives and saying it's too expensive because of what Trump has done. Do you agree with that? Would you do that? Would you sacrifice the renewable energy part for the cost on the electricity bill and the consumer now?
I think that the people of Rhode Island deserve to save money and have a really clean climate. And I know there's a way to do both. I think it's a shame that this governor has not done anything to hold an out-of-state utility company responsible for the rates that people are paying. It looks to me like Rhode Island Energy is thrilled with his proposal, and that makes me worried. What more should they be doing and doing on behalf of the people of Rhode Island? But ultimately, solar and wind are the cheapest forms of energy. We should be leaning into this. This is another good example of playing politics and putting politics ahead of people. When he signed that climate bill in 2021, he was very proud for all the kudos he got, but he put no action plan in place. So that's the job of a governor, is you've got to make sure that you're producing clean, cheap energy for the people of Rhode Island and not waking up in an election year and saying, I'm going to scrap this whole thing.
In terms of making things affordable for some people but less for others, so there's now a millionaire's tax proposal in his budget. Would you support a millionaire's tax? Are you for that?
I'm very open to a millionaire's tax, and I'll be talking more about my plans around that. I especially think in a world where millionaires are doing quite well under President Trump, to the extent that they will be the first people who I think should be helping the people of Rhode Island and providing the resources for all that we need in the state.
What about the truck tolls? So there is a plan to get those back up and running. It seems like it's going to be another year, but the plan is, speaking of Alviti and the governor, to do it. But that was a plan that came to fruition under Gina Raimondo. Would you want the truck tolls back on?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know why it's taken so long. We should all understand why it's taken so long.
Yeah, they said they needed to put replace some of the equipment, but it's been over a year.
Seems like a long time to me.
So yes. You would have hoped they were on faster.
Yes, absolutely.
Joe Shekarchi announced last week that he's not going to jump into this race. What do you think about that? Do you think that helps you?
I think that, I've always said that if I were governor and Joe Shekarchi were speaker, I think we could get great things done for the people of Rhode Island. I'm glad the race is clear now, and when I am out talking to Rhode Islanders, they're desperate for change. They're looking for leadership. And so I'm excited just to get out and keep meeting people in Rhode Island, telling my story, sharing, listening, and making sure that I can serve them as much as possible.
But do you think it helps clear the runway for you a little bit?
I think it's great to have clarity, yes, and I'm excited to have a one-on-one race for the governor.
And actually, going back to something at DOT, because I know you had a plan, right? You wanted to go through the accountability, and you think he should have been fired. Would you keep the lawsuit in place if you become governor, or would you drop the lawsuit that they filed against the inspection company?
I would ask the Attorney General what he thinks. I have no problem if he thinks we can be successful and we can get money for the people of Rhode Island, then I would keep it on. But it could also be a fool's errand, I'm not sure, and ultimately I would lean on an expert in that case. I think the most important thing we should do, though, is build an Office of Safety and Accountability. For example, one of the things we learned in those hearings was that we completely outsource all our inspections. In fact, Alviti didn't even know who the name of the inspection leader was in his own department, and he seemed to imply that we owe no responsibility because it was all outsourced. You have to have expertise inside the department, and that's part of what my accountability plan for the DOT includes. It's very important that we get that right. And you can look around the country. There are other great state DOTs, and we should be looking at what they're doing and bringing those best practices here, and that's what my plan had in place.
And so tying that in, right, I think the governor is trying to walk a fine line, like we want to keep this lawsuit. I mean, do you think if he fired Peter Alviti at some point, that would have hurt his case. Do you think DOT is deflecting, and the governor is deflecting too much of the blame away from DOT, saying it was the inspectors, it was the inspectors?
The governor promised us a day of reckoning, and we have had no reckoning. And when I heard that, I didn't just think it would be outside companies. I assume there are real deficiencies in the department. I think it starts at the top, which is why I did call for Peter Alviti to be fired. But I think that there are structural opportunities inside it. There's a culture. I think there are a lot of things that we could do to make the DOT run more efficiently. And I am personally shocked that there haven't been any other changes in the DOT in over 2 years since this whole bridge mishap happened.
I'm sure you're aware, every statement the governor's campaign puts out, and he says this almost every time now, is he lumps you in with the opioid crisis. And you've been asked about this for years, and obviously it's come up again with the lawsuit that Zach Cunha fired before he left office. What do you think of that criticism? Are you getting tired of it? Do you bear some of the responsibility for CVS's role in this?
Well, I think facts matter, and I think this is another place where the governor plays politics. So I have friends who have lost children to the opioid crisis. I take this very seriously. I don't think it's something that should be a political situation. But because facts matter, what I want people to know is under my watch at CVS, when I led the retail business, we had an almost 40% reduction in opioids dispensed because we did more than anyone in the country. I'll give you 2 examples. We cut off over 600 pill mill doctors where we wouldn't take their prescriptions anymore. And we had the biggest drug take-back program this country's ever seen. And so that resulted in almost 40% reduction. Under my leadership, we also walked away from $2 billion in cigarette sales. I had lost my own mother to lung cancer. So for the governor to say we put profits over people in the face of all of that, there's nothing about that makes any sense to me. And in a very, very difficult situation, I am proud of the leadership that I had for the company.
Right, but that lawsuit, which again is more recent, claimed that CVS ignored some of its own red flags.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying the facts. When if the lawsuit were to proceed, I'm sure the facts will prevail, and you'll look at the real data here, and people will understand that. Like when I talk to people, they say, I don't blame my pharmacist for too many pills, right? It's a situation. I'll give you an example of some of the legislation that also changed, and we worked on this. In 2015, if you had a root canal, you used to leave and you'd get 30 pills. And by law, pharmacists had to fill the 30 pills. We changed legislation in this state and across the country, so now it's only 10 pills. It's all those little changes that really make a difference, because at the end of the day, the way people did get addicted to these medicines was in their own family's medicine cabinets, and that's why we were working so hard to reduce the number of pills that were out there.
So you don't think CVS played a role in that?
No, I think CVS was a leader in trying to make a difference in that.
You mentioned CVS in your talk upstairs. Are you concerned? You said that other states are trying to woo CVS out of Rhode Island. Are you concerned they could leave?
I'm concerned that we don't have a governor who is focused on the big employers in the state and making sure that good paying jobs stay here. So yes, CVS is one of those companies, and we need a governor who's constantly checking in with all the leaders and saying, what would it take for you to add jobs here? What we learned a few months ago is the governor hadn't spoken to the head of CVS in over a year because he claimed the CEO hadn't called him. Well, that's the job of the governor. You got to be reaching out, you got to think about all those employees and making sure, like Hasbro left and we're losing 700 jobs and all those families are affected. Their lives are upended, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen in another company in this state.
Are you hearing anything, though, from the inside that's a real danger?
I'm hearing that they are being asked, but I think that this is an important place for them, and so I don't want to raise the alarm bell. I'm just saying that's the job of the governor, is to constantly be checking in and making sure you keep the good companies here.
And again, there's a fine line between keeping them, and then there's some people who say, oh, too much corporate welfare, like you don't want to give too many tax credits or benefits or something like that. Where do you draw the line on that thing to keep a significant company in Rhode Island, any company?
When I talk to families across the state, what they want for their kids is a good life. It starts with having a good job. And I think that big companies play a role in that. I'd like to have more big companies here, medium-sized, small companies. There are all ways for people to get good employment and make sure they can afford to live here. So I think having a strong economy is a big, important part of being able to invest in all the social services that we need in this state. And so I very much want more businesses to be able to grow. And my focus, the reason I care about that, is to make sure that the people of this state can have really good paying jobs.
Just to wrap up, is there anything you think the governor is doing well?
Is there anything I think the governor is doing well? I'll have to think about that.
And in terms of, your pitch to the voters as we're 6 months away, do you think policy-wise there's going to be a lot that would be different, or do you think it's a style and operational mindset? Right. What do you think would be different?
I think there will be policy differences, and I'll be starting to roll out. I mean, even just look at my DOT proposal. That is a policy proposal. And I think there are other places where we'll be differentiated. But I also think leadership matters. I think competence matters. And I think that I know that when I am governor, I'll be rolling up my sleeves every day and working hard and pushing people and making sure that we're responsive, we're listening, we're not diminishing people's concerns. I mean, back to the bridge, one of the things that most aggravates people is that sign that says, "Thank you for your patience." And people say to me, "I'm not feeling patient." So, and part of that is just listening more and being responsive. And so all those things matter, leadership matters, and I think that'll be a very important factor for voters as they think about who do they trust to really make the state work for them and help their families.
Okay.